Pennsylvania. Our CNN drone is flying over a polling place near Pittsburgh. We're live in many of the crucial battleground states right now that are so critical in determining who will win the White House.
All right, here we
We're
go.
back with a special edition, election night edition, I should say, of the Situation Room. We're counting down to the first results in the presidential race. Votes will start coming in to the CNN election center just minutes from now from Indiana and Kentucky, where some polling places close early. Right now, we're getting more insights from our exit poll results. Let's go back to David Challey. And David, what else are you learning?
Hey, well, we are looking at the Barack Obama factor in tonight's election. You saw him campaigning hard out there for Hillary Clinton. Take a look at his approval rating across the country tonight in the exit polls. 54% approve, 45% disapprove. This is about what we had seen in the pre-election polling. That seems to be bearing out among the electorate tonight. Also, we asked, do you want to continue Barack Obama's policies or not? Or do you want the more liberal or conservative? Take a look at this, Wolf. Those that want to continue Barack Obama's policies or want more liberal policies, they add up to about 47% of the electorate. 46% of the electorate today say they want more conservative policies than Barack Obama's policies. Clearly a divided country in terms of the president's policies. And finally, we asked about the feelings of the federal government. I don't think this will surprise anyone paying attention to this election, but take a look at this. Dissatisfied, 46% of voters today with the federal government. Add 23% of angry voters. Take a look at that. That is 69% of voters voting today are either dissatisfied or angry with the federal government. That is what both of these candidates have been trying to respond to throughout this election.
We're going to get more numbers from you shortly, David. Thanks very much. Jake and Dan are with us. Jake, these numbers, what do they say to you?
Well, they suggest if they hold up, and these are still early-ish exit poll numbers, that this could be a long night in a competitive race, a very divided country, and if a lot of people feel resentful of Washington, that's significant. 54% supporting President Obama, approving of the job he's done, that's also significant, and it shows what we've been saying all along, that this could be a very competitive race.
The fact that Barack Obama's approval rating is well above 50% is very telling, and it is so different from what we've seen in recent history with a president on the way out, Republican or Democrat, and it is a reminder of why Hillary Clinton has done something unusual, which is embrace a two-term president and effectively run on a third term.
But there are a lot of angry voters based on these numbers out there that, as you say, Jake, that seems to vote relatively well for Donald Trump.
It would. I mean, that is the message that he's been driving home since the very moment he came down the escalator in the summer of 2015. The government is broken. It's not working for you when it comes to trade deals. It's not working for you when it comes to immigration or terrorism. And as he's been saying the last few weeks, it's time to drain the swamp of Washington, D.C. That has been a very powerful message. And obviously, it's taken root in the minds of a lot of voters.
We're only 15 minutes away, Dana, or so from the first actual votes coming in. Exit poll numbers are important. They give us a clue, an indication. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not so right, but votes obviously count.
That's the whole ballgame, no question about it. And it is going to be so fascinating to see as those vote boards come in, as you start to read them, whether or not what we've been looking at, whether it is the divide in terms of the way that voters want this country to go, or the divide with regard to these two candidates bear out in how we see these states come out.
Let's go over to Anderson for some analysis. Anderson.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Kirsten, as we look at again, more of this exit polls, and again, it's very early in the evening, just a reminder of just how divided this nation is. I mean, essentially split evenly on whether they want policies akin to President Obama's or more liberal, or the complete opposite.
And angry. And, there was a poll right before the election that had 2/3 of all voters saying that they were ashamed to be an American. So you have a very unhappy electorate right now. But I think if you look at the breakdown, and I think we have to remember there are a lot of early voters, and so the composition might be a little different when you add that in, but it doesn't look that different from the composition in 2012. So these are early numbers, we have to wait and see, but right now we have white voters about 2 points down, black voters about 1 point down, Hispanic up 1, and Asian up 1. So, it'll be interesting to see as the night goes on if that changes and how the overall composition, once we factor everything together.
But as Kirsten pointed out, in early voting, certainly in a state like Florida, we've seen a much larger turnout of Latino voters.
Yeah.
And a different sort of Latino voter, not just sort of traditional Cuban voters. We have much more Latino population in Florida now from South America, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, you see some change in terms of the Asian vote in a place like North Carolina. I mean, they're voting, you see a voting surge there as well with Latinos and all across the South. I mean, those two voting blocks are the fastest growing voting blocks, and historically, they haven't had the turnout numbers that African Americans have had or whites have had. I mean, this is going to be the most diverse electorate that America has ever seen, and we have in Donald Trump a candidate that hasn't always known how to reach out to those groups, and in many ways has repelled them. I think the fact that they're showing up in such numbers certainly speaks to Donald Trump, and also I think speaks to a lot of these grassroots organizations across the country, like Voto Latino, that have been registering these groups in droves.
It also speaks to where the future of the country is going.
Yeah.
Well, the future's here already.
That will be the biggest question answered tonight or early tomorrow, or hopefully not in weeks. But you know, the rationale behind a lot of the Republican consternation over Trump, people who are not voting for Trump, was two things. One, it's kind of a bad look for conservatives, as the kid would say. Two, that he wasn't going to be electable in a general because of the changing demography of the country. That will bear out. We will find out if that's actually true tonight. But it's funny, when you go back, and I went back through some of the polling in the Republican primary about whether voters prioritized electability, they really didn't. If they had, we would have Marco Rubio or John Kasich as the nominee. So this issue, this angst over Republicans, putting up an electable candidate might have really just been from strategists and analysts, because clearly it wasn't that important to the electorate.
David?
When Bill Clinton ran for presidency in 1992, 88% of the electorate was Caucasian white. Hillary Clinton runs at 70%. The numbers are coming down, down, and down. And that's why for both parties, appealing to the minority vote matters. And I think one of the questions, if Donald Trump loses, then he may win. I think these numbers suggest he can still win this thing. But if he loses, there's going to be a big question about the Republican Party relationship, especially to Latinos. I would point out that California used to be a purple state. Republicans could win California at the presidential level. And in the 1990s, the Republicans put a ballot out there, Proposition 187, that stuck a stick right in the eyes of Latinos. And Latinos went over to the Democratic side, and California has been a blue state ever since. It went off the board. If that happens nationwide, the Republicans are going to fracture as well.
There's been so much talk of the autopsy that was done by the Republican Party in 2012. If Donald Trump does not win tonight, there's going to be autopsies of autopsies.
But do they just re-release that same autopsy?
I actually don't think an autopsy is needed. The reason will be very clear, and it will be because the results of that autopsy were completely sort of overlooked or ignored by the
But within the Republican Party, there's always a difference of opinion, or that there wasn't a true conservative candidate. There'll be that argument made,
and that's the thing. As I keep saying, Donald Trump might do better than Mitt Romney.
Right.
He's going to win Ohio possibly. He's going to win Iowa possibly. He could just win the whole thing on this strategy that was really about white voters, right? And so.
But to lose to a candidate in Hillary Clinton who has 54% disapproval rating going into the election, and if you still lose, then you've got to do some soul searching.
But the Republicans have got to do some soul searching anyway, because there were a lot of Republicans that wanted somebody talking about things that Republicans for too long have talked about but hadn't done. And that's reforming Washington. That's getting the Republicans allowed the budget to be spent over $1 trillion last year, so they haven't demonstrated what a conservative is. And there are a lot of people out there saying the Republicans haven't shown anything different than the Democrats, and that's why Donald Trump was successful this year. There's problems within the party itself with an identity.
I think one of the things that you're going to see tonight, and Nia brought this up, and I think that Hillary Clinton's going to have a more difficult time winning a state like Ohio and Iowa, whereas she's going to fare much better than people think in a state like Florida. And then you see North Carolina, which is in the deep south, actually turning purplish blue. And I think that for a long period of time, you're going to be able to put Iowa and Ohio in the red category, and we're getting to the point where you can put Florida and North Carolina in the blue category. And what that shows is the shifting of demographics in this country. I've said here many times with you, Anderson, I said that Donald Trump's number one problem, the thing that will beat Donald Trump in November, and we're here now, is demographics. It was true when he was nominated, and it's very true now. And unless the Republican Party adapts, there was a picture taken, and I know Marie wants to get in, but there was a picture taken in South Carolina during the South Carolina primary. There was a picture of Trey Gowdy, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, and Nikki Haley. It was what the Republican Party wanted their future to look like. The next day, Corey Lewandowski went out and beat them by 20 points in the South Carolina primary. And so the Republican Party has a real problem of how it wants to look in the future.
Corey, where are you tonight? I mean, obviously, we talked about this before. Florida's must-win state for Donald Trump. You still agree with that, yeah?
Absolutely.
Well, what other states are you looking for that path to 270? And where do you see the best?
So I think the path that most people agree is best for Donald Trump is you have to win Florida. You're going to carry the Romney states. That would include carrying North Carolina. As you know, Mitt Romney went into North Carolina down 450,000 votes on election day and came out ahead of Barack Obama by 77,000. Donald Trump's numbers are much better than that. I think you include the state of New Hampshire there. And then I think if you look at the battleground states which are in play, Donald Trump is going to win the state of Ohio. No Republican has carried that state in 2 presidential election cycles. He is going to win Iowa. It's a foregone conclusion. Barack Obama wanted to go there, and he was told not to go there because they are so concerned about the state of Michigan that Barack Obama was in Michigan on the eve of the election, making sure that state stays blue. We will see if that is going to happen. What we do know is that the African-American turnout in Detroit is 50% of what it was 4 years ago. What we do know is that the blue-collar voters have historically, we do know that from the early polling. Of course we know that. What we also know is that the blue-collar voters are exactly in line with Donald Trump because they've been hammered by bad trade deals, which Hillary Clinton has called the gold standard. And now they're trying to change that. The Democrats are campaigning in Michigan. That is where a state that's a great opportunity for Donald Trump. And then you look at Colorado, where he's got a 16,000 vote lead going in to election day. That's unheard of for a Republican in a state like that.
So, Marie, when you hear Corey's idea of where the path is, do you buy that?
It's still, I mean, sure, anything is possible. It's still very narrow. It's very steep. And it's riddled with thickets and thorns and holes that Donald Trump himself dug. The first one being, if he loses tonight, he will have started that loss the minute that he came down that escalator after he called Mexican immigrants rapists, criminals, and drug lords. There's an exit poll that, actually an election eve poll that Latino Decisions does, and they're the premier polling firm for Hispanics in this country. They did it last night. 5,000 Hispanics, and they do it bilingually, which is how you're supposed to poll Latino voters. They said the number one issue for Latinos that they are going to come out and vote on is immigration. That is almost unheard of because normally it's jobs and the economy. This is how much the discussion on immigration has impacted.
In 2008 and 2012, both President McCain and President Romney decided they were going to bet on states like Michigan and Pennsylvania in some hope that African American voters simply were not going to come out and they were going to be able to swell white vote in certain parts. And that is the same gamble that Donald Trump is taking tonight. It's this hope that somehow everybody in Detroit is just going to sit at home. It's this hope that everybody in Cuyahoga County in Ohio is just going to stay at home, or everybody in Philadelphia is just going to stay home. And it just does not work that way. Every single cycle, the Republican Party goes after Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin as if they're their unicorn, and it hasn't worked for President McCain or President Romney.
Let's take a look with Wolf and John at the Magic Ball, guys.
Anderson, thanks very much. John, we're here at the Magic Ball. Tell us what Hillary Clinton is looking for tonight, hoping for, what Donald Trump is hoping for. Work it out for us.
First and foremost, it's finally here. A little more than an hour, we're going to start to fill this in. The first poll is actually closing, 5 minutes or so. Start to fill it. I just want to tell our viewers, you see New Hampshire's already red. That's voting last night in a couple of small towns at midnight. So you'll see some states fill in during the night. Early on, they fill in by who's leading. That doesn't mean who wins. Follow us for the win. So if you're Hillary Clinton, well, let's go back in time and look at a 2012 map. You just heard the panel. They're excited tonight, aren't they? Because they're expecting a close competitive race. So if you're Hillary Clinton, what are you looking for? Number one, protect the blues. Everyone knows that. Protect Michigan and Pennsylvania. Number two, early on. Let's go through what happens here. Let me take this off. One of the things I'm going to look early on for Hillary Clinton, we probably got to get this while it takes. See this little tiny county here in western Indiana? Indiana's likely to vote Republican tonight. It's a Republican state. It's the home of Donald Trump's running mate. Vigo County, Indiana, says 49-49. He actually won by a few good votes. It's only been wrong twice in the last 100 years. It has a 15 consecutive election streak, so it's one of the little quirky counties I like to look at on election night. So I'll watch that to see who the next president is going to be, period, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Then if you're Hillary Clinton, as the votes start to come in, one of the early states that will come in is Virginia. Now, Clinton is favored here. It's the home state of her running mate, the senator, the former governor, Tim Kaine. Even if she's ahead in Virginia, Wolf, this is going to tell us a lot about what's happening in competitive states like neighboring North Carolina. So the results start to come in here. Number one, How's Donald Trump doing out here? You asked me a question about Hillary Clinton, but her team is going to be looking at how much is Donald Trump running it up in these small rural counties, because you have them here in Virginia. Guess what? You have them in Ohio. You have them in Pennsylvania. You have them in North Carolina. Number two, Virginia close races are settled right up here in the Washington, D.C. area suburbs. This is Prince William County. Used to be reliably Republican. Look how much President Obama won it by 4 years ago when Virginia was relatively competitive. Republican voters have become Democratic voters. Those college-educated white voters for Hillary Clinton, they are key in Virginia, they're key in the Pennsylvania, especially in the Philly suburbs, they're key in the Cleveland suburbs, in the Columbus suburbs, they're key in the Research Triangle in North Carolina. This will be our first laboratory of those voters. Plus, one of the biggest population growths here in Prince William County, Latinos. Latinos, we expect Latinos to have a big imprint on tonight's election. Our first indication will be right here. And then you're going to look down the coast. Obviously, Hillary Clinton's strategy in the last few days has been a blocking strategy. North Carolina will become key to us all night long. President Obama won it in 2008. Mitt Romney took it back in 2012. It is one of the most contested states in America. One thing we're going to look for here, what percentage of the white vote is Hillary Clinton getting? Back in 2008, President Obama got 35% of the white vote. He carried the state, right? Just barely. Look at that, just barely. His percentage of the white vote fell to 31% 4 years ago, and he lost the state. Another place, the battleground within the battleground, we're going to look at Wayne County. This is where Raleigh is. Yes, there's a significant African-American population here that Hillary Clinton must turn out. A lot of that was done in early voting. But look at the margin here, 55-44. President Obama wins this county by 11 points, but he lost the state, just narrowly. If you go back to 2008 when he won it by 15 points. Again, here, you're looking at African-American turnout, but also those college-educated white.
If you're Donald Trump, what are you worried about right now?
If you're Donald Trump, well, what you're looking at right now...
And what do you want to do if you're Donald Trump?
If you're Donald Trump, let's start right here. If you're Donald Trump, you want to win this. Bakari was just talking about this as the unicorn. I covered George W. Bush. Both times he wanted this very badly. Mitt Romney wanted this very badly. Republicans always look at Pennsylvania. Look at all that red. You look at all that red and you think, why can't I win this state? This is probably key to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has to win Florida. He probably has to win North Carolina. 29 electoral votes in Florida, 15 in North Carolina. But then he still needs more. He has to turn. Let's go back to the winning map. This is the winning map for the Democrats. This is 8 years ago. Here's the winning map for the Democrats 4 years ago. If Donald Trump is going to win, yes, he has to keep all these reds from Romney, but he has to turn something big blue. This would be 29. This would be 20. This would be 16. Donald Trump is looking number one. That's a must. And if he gets that, then he needs a big blue to leapfrog. He's also going to look at Corey's home state up there of New Hampshire. Donald Trump's path is more complicated. He has to win many more states. So what is he going to look for within these states? Well, it's 8 o'clock hour is Pennsylvania. We'll get some clues in the 7 o'clock hour. 8 o'clock hour in Pennsylvania. Number one, what are the margins in these small rural counties? Is Donald Trump running it up? Tiny, less than 1% of the population, but he needs to run it up like that, maybe even more. That's your white working class voters coming out to vote. Number two, what is he doing in these blue areas? He went to Scranton on purpose. Can this be a smaller margin for Donald Trump here? If it is, he's in play in Pennsylvania. Wolf and Anderson.
Thanks very much, John. We're about to get the first results of the 2016 presidential race.
This election night will be historic no matter who wins.
Right now, from coast to coast, across presidential battlegrounds, it's all coming down to this night and this choice in a history-making, rule-breaking, jaw-dropping campaign.
Can we trust her with our security? She is disqualified.
He just spends all of his time denigrating, criticizing America.
Tonight, voters get the last word in the election of a lifetime. Hillary Clinton seeking to break the ultimate glass ceiling.
When any barrier falls in America, it clears the way for everyone.
Donald Trump hoping to shatter expectations again.
They said Trump doesn't have a chance. We love defeating those people, don't we?
After months of twists and turns, the first results now just minutes away.
We're gonna win because of you.
I will totally accept the results if I win.
This is CNN's coverage of election night in America. The fight for the presidency, the battle for Congress, and the issues dividing the nation.
Either we win this election or we lose the country.
Our future is at stake.
The people are choosing, the world is watching, and anything is possible until the last vote.
United States right now. Right now, we're in North Carolina, and all the battlegrounds that will decide this presidential race. Millions of Americans, they are casting ballots in what could be the most important election of their lives. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the CNN Election Center. We're closing in on our first chance to make projections in the presidential race. Americans now choosing whether to elect the first woman to lead the nation or one of only a handful of political outsiders to ever serve as commander-in-chief. We're counting down to the top of the next hour, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's when polls close in the battleground states of Georgia and Virginia. They are two of the key races we'll be watching very closely tonight. Also, at the top of the hour, voting ends in Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vermont. Some polling places in the Eastern time zone in Indiana and Kentucky. In fact, they are closing right now. We expect early results from those two states at any moment. A total of 60 electoral votes are on the line in the next hour. And remember, 270 are needed to win the White House. Jake Topper, we've been building toward this moment now for nearly 2 years.
That's right, Wolf, and there's never been a campaign like this. This could be, and there could be, new surprises in these final hours of this very long election. We're monitoring voting in key locations in the battleground states where the race could turn one way or another. We're also inside Clinton and Trump election night headquarters. They are both in New York City tonight, only about a mile and a half apart on the island of Manhattan. Jeff Zeleny is covering the Clinton campaign. Sarah Murray is covering the Trump campaign. First to you, Jeff.
Well, Jake, the Clinton campaign is increasingly confident of reaching 270 electoral votes, even at this hour, as they don't know exactly how they will still get there. But I am here in the Javits Center. You can see behind me here, this is the stage where Secretary Clinton will give a speech she believes one way or the other tonight. She has just arrived in Manhattan from her house outside of the city here, and she'll be watching those results. At this hour, this is what the Clinton campaign believes the state of play is. They believe there is urgent concern in the state of North Carolina. I just talked to the campaign manager, and he told me that he believes this will be the tightest of all battleground states. It is exactly why Secretary Clinton, as she came here into Manhattan, was on the phone on the radio just a short time ago trying to get out the vote among her supporters in Fayetteville, North Carolina. This is a city-by-city effort here, Jake. So North Carolina, Ohio are their two trouble spots. But they are confident at this hour in Michigan. They believe that the visits there yesterday from the president and Secretary Clinton herself have turned around Michigan. And they are confident in Florida as well, Jake, because of that early vote. So it's at this hour they believe that Matt reaches 270, even if they're not exactly sure which states will fall. Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, the Clinton campaign very concerned about North Carolina. That is a state that President Obama won in 2008 and then lost to Mitt Romney in 2012. Let's go now to Sarah Murray. She's at Trump campaign headquarters, just a few blocks away from the Clinton campaign headquarters. Sarah?
Well, Jake, it's a much tougher map for Donald Trump, and sources are telling me that one key internal metric is showing Donald Trump falling short of the 270 electoral votes he's going to need. Now, in spite of this, plenty of people in Trump Tower are still feeling very optimistic going into tonight. They're looking at a number of states, both internally and publicly, where the polls are very close, and they believe those could break late in their favor, and ultimately Donald Trump could come to victory. But this key internal metric at this point does not spell a win. Now, as for Donald Trump himself, he has boldly been predicting victory on the campaign trail, essentially since he got into this race, insisting that they're winning all over the country. But privately, he's a little bit more of a worrier. He has been pressing his aides all day long for updates on what they can point to, what data sets they have to indicate where the race is headed. And a lot of this has been sort of an educational moment for Donald Trump's aides and Donald Trump. This is obviously the first time he's ever run for president. So they're pointing to different states and saying, okay, we need to look at the independent voters in this state. We need to look at the early vote in this state where it's key. So it's an interesting dynamic going on behind the scenes at Trump Tower today, Jake.
All right, Sarah Murray with the Trump campaign. Let's go now to David Chalian, our political director. He has new information from the exit polls about what voters who went to the polls, at least according to these early-ish exit polls, think about these two major party candidates. David?
Early-ish, yes, Jake. These numbers are preliminary. They will change throughout the night, but you know one of the major storylines we've been following throughout this entire election season is just how unpopular both of these candidates are. That bears out with the voters today as well. Take a look at Hillary Clinton's favorability among people voting today across the country. 44% say they have a favorable opinion of her, 54% unfavorable. Donald Trump fares even worse on this score. 37% have a favorable opinion of him. 61% of voters in the country today tell us they have an unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump. And as you know, Jake, their Achilles' heels were front and center in this campaign. Take a look about whether or not Hillary Clinton's email problem bothers voters. 62% of voters say yes. The whole email situation with Hillary Clinton does bother them. 37% say no. This has been a hurdle she hasn't really gotten over throughout the entire campaign. Same for Donald Trump about his treatment of women. 71% of voters say it bothers them. 28% say it doesn't. These problems that presented themselves throughout this campaign, their unfavorability, their specific issues on email or women, they never resolved before voters went to the polls today, Jake.
Fascinating, David Chalian, thank you so much. And Wolf, I mean, these exit polls also indicate that 54% of the American people approve of the current president. They just don't seem too excited about the one that they're going to have next.
This is truly a historic night for the American people. I think it's historic indeed for the world right now, irrespective of whether Hillary Clinton wins or Donald Trump wins. This is history.
Well, either we're going to have the first female president in the history of this country, and we should remember that only 100 years ago in this country, women didn't even have the right to vote nationwide, or we will have the first person elected president, Donald Trump, who has never served in government or the military, the first one ever. So, I mean, that is about as much of an outsider as you can get, even if he has been part of the financial world. And also, in terms of his experience, really quite new to the whole scene.
Because those of us who love American history, we're really obsessed tonight by what's going on.
That's right. Not only is it the outsider versus first woman, the potential of that, it's also, we were talking before about the fact that President Obama's approval ratings are so high and how Hillary Clinton has embraced him. And this dynamic hasn't happened. Even the possibility of what is effectively a third term, somebody who takes over the same party after a two-term president, since 1988, when George Herbert Walker Bush won after Reagan's 2 terms. And then before that, it was back in 1948. So this is a rarity if Hillary Clinton does see success in her, as I said, embrace of a 2-term president.
We have our first key race alert of the night. All right, these are the first results. Actual votes coming in very, very early in the state of Kentucky. You can see 1% of the vote is in. Donald Trump has almost 80% of the vote. Hillary Clinton has 18% of the vote. He's ahead now by more than 2,600 votes. Once again, very, very early in Kentucky right now. Our first key race alert of the night. Let's go over to John King at the Magic Wall. John, a bunch of states are closing at the top of the hour, including some key battlegrounds that we've been paying a lot of attention right now. But let's take a look at Kentucky first.
You look at Kentucky, and again, we have 1% of the voted, so we're going to spend some time counting tonight, and that's good. We have a competitive race. We're going to count the votes. If you're Donald Trump, you love that. As you watch the early results, let's just be clear. They don't tell us much, except I think we can all agree Donald Trump is most likely to win the state of Kentucky and to win it quite handily. So what will we learn? We will learn a lot. Well, if we get coal country down in here, and Donald Trump has made an appeal saying Hillary Clinton has abandoned coal miners, has abandoned old steel towns, has abandoned white working class voters who live in small town America. So Kentucky will teach us something tonight. The margins in places like this, if Donald Trump is running up, again, these are the first votes, so just don't go to Vegas or make any bets on this, but if Donald Trump is running up margins like this in these small towns, not a lot of people live here. You see the early votes, just 313 to 68, but if he's running up big margins like that, as we get the early results in a state like Kentucky, that does tell us something, because there are communities like that here in southern Ohio. There are communities like that here in southwestern Virginia. There are communities like that in Pennsylvania, which we expect will be one of the defining tests tonight, right here in Pennsylvania. But that's at 8 o'clock. So when we get results, the 6:30 polls are closed, the 7 o'clock results will start to come in. What you look for is you're doing a little CSI, if you will, as you look at the towns in a state like this. And so what's going to happen here? Indiana, we expect to stay red, but we want to look at it there. So the early results come from states that we think, Indiana and Kentucky, we think are going to be reliably red, but we can still learn from them looking at those results. Just want to also tell our viewers, these New Hampshire votes, when you see, as we go through the night, if you're staying with us throughout the night, states will turn a color that's just leading. Until we call them, it's just who's leading in the vote. So sometimes the map can look a little deceptive. These are, again, you go to New Hampshire, Dixville, Notch, some other small towns voted last night. That's all we have in New Hampshire right now. The polls are still open.
55 people or so have voted so far, so that's obviously...
No stress on them today. They got it over with.
The electoral map right now, 270. That's the number you need to be elected president. Going into this night, where do we stand?
This is where we stood coming into the night. 268 to 204, so clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton. If you look at the dark blue states, those are states we at CNN view as solid Democratic. It's almost certain to vote Democratic. The lighter blue states, those are leaning Democratic. We have to keep an eye on those when we start to get results. When we look deeper into the exit polls, the dark red states, reliably Republican. The shaded red states, leaning Republican. Again, places like especially Ohio and Iowa, we're going to watch them all night long. The Clinton campaign thinks there could be a chance to replay. But here's where we start tonight. So if we're going to have an early night, if you will, meaning Clinton starts with an advantage, what would an early night look like? An early night would look like she starts to run it up and we call that one. Now, I expect Florida to be competitive. That was the closest state in 2012 between Obama and Romney. That close. Florida's always a battleground. We go back to 2000 or whatever. But if Clinton were somehow to lock up Florida early on, we're projecting to the west. But if you're winning this state big, well, guess what? That would tell us something. But
what would Trump have to do to offset Florida?
Right. So let's if she lost Florida. If she lost Florida, that's 29.
If she wins Florida, what would Trump have to do to still win the presidency?
It's incredibly hard. Can he do it? Can he do it? Here's what Donald Trump would have to do to win. He would have to win North Carolina, which if you're losing Florida, but he would have to win North Carolina. He would have to win Pennsylvania. He would have to win Michigan. That gets him in the 255 grid. This is why Donald Trump needs Florida. Then you're looking at 255.
Let's say he gets Arizona.
How does he get there from there? So then you come out here and he gets Arizona. If he gets Arizona and Nevada, that would put him over the top. But if you talk to even most Republicans in Nevada, believe with early voting, that one's going to be blue. We have it as a toss-up right now. So if he didn't get Nevada, but he got Arizona, can he get there still? Then he can get there with New Hampshire. So he can get there. The question is, if you're losing this, it's hard to believe you're going to win up here unless he has an overwhelming surge among those white working class voters. Is it impossible? No. If you look at the data heading into the election, unlikely, but that's why we're going to count, Wolf.
We're going to count all those votes. We're getting closer and closer to our first chance to make projections in this presidential race. Coming up, the first wave of poll closings, including the battlegrounds of Georgia and Virginia. Much more ahead on this election night in America.
Election Night in America is brought to you by CA Technologies. Go to CNNPolitics.com for more about this momentous election and download the CNN Politics app from the App Store, built with CA Technologies.
Back in the good old days, things were just better.
Those rules don't work for me.
We valued hard work.
I don't believe in anyone telling me how I should live my life.
Skinny caramel macchiato.
Back then, technology was a self-cleaning oven.
I liked things the way they were, except my abs.
I do, however, believe in